Satchidanandam Paramasugdam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dandvatitam Gagan Sadrisham Tattvamasyadilakshayam Ekam Nityam Vimlam Jalam Sarvadhi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Sadguru Tam Namam. Shivam friends, today we will start our reading session of chapter 37 onwards, and in this chapter the Prahlad meditates for thousands of years the Asura kingdom in chaos. Vashiji said, Prahlad, the victor over hostile hosts, was sitting in divine meditation, absorbed in his entranced bliss for a long time. The soul reposing in its original state of unalterable ecstasy made his body as still as a rock in painting or a figure carved in relief on stone. In this manner, sitting in his house in a posture as unshaken as the firm Mount Meru is fixed upon the earth, a long time passed in his meditation. The great Asura demons of his palace tried to rouse him in vain because his deadened mind remained deaf to their calls like a solid rock. He was impassive as a parched grain to the showers of rain. For thousands of years he remained intent upon his God, his gaze fixed and firm, as unmoved as the carved sun upon a sundial. Having thus attained the state of supreme bliss, the sight of unhappiness disappeared from his view, as it is unknown to the supremely blissful being. During this time, the whole extent of his kingdom was overshaken by spreading anarchy and oppression, as if ruling over the poor fishes. Because after Hiranyakashipu was killed and his son became an ascetic, there was nobody left to rule over the kingdoms of the Asura race. As Prahlad was not to be roused from his meditation slumber by the solicitations of the Daitya chiefs or the cries of his oppressed people, the enemies of the gods were as sorry not to have their graceful lord among them as the bees are aggrieved for lack of the blooming lotus at night. They found him absorbed in his meditation like when the world is drowned in deep sleep after the sun departs below the horizon. The sorrowful Daityas left his presence and went away wherever they liked. They roved about at random as they do in an ungoverned state. In time, the infernal regions became the seat of anarchy and oppression. Good and honest dealings bade farewell all at once. The houses of the weak were robbed by the strong, and the restraints of laws were set at nothing. People oppressed one another and robbed women of their clothes. There were crying and wailing of people on all sides, and houses were pulled down in the city. Houses and gardens were robbed and spoiled, and outlawry and rapacity spread all over the land. The Asuras were in deep sorrow. Their families were starving without food or fruit. There were disturbances, riots rising everywhere, and the face of the sky was darkened on all sides. They were derided by the youths of the gods and invaded by wild robbers and envious animals. Houses were robbed of their properties and laid waste and empty. The Asura kingdom became a scene of horror with lawless fighting for wives and properties of others. The wailings of those who were robbed of their wealth and wives, it made the scene seem like the rule of the dark Kali age when the atrocious marauders are let loose to spread devastation all over the earth. And in the next chapter, Vishnu decides to restore order and awaken Prahlada. Vasishtha continued, now Vishnu, who slept in his couch of the snake in his watery house of the milky ocean, and whose delight was to preserve the order of all groups of the worlds, after he rose from his sleep at the end of the rainy season, looked into the course of the world in his own mind for achieving the objects of the gods. At a glance of his thought, he surveyed the state of the triple world, composed of heaven, earth, and the regions below. Then he directed his attention towards the affairs of the infernal regions of the demons. There he saw Prahlad sitting in his intent meditation samadhi. Then Vishnu looked into the increasing prosperity of Indra's palace. Sitting as he was on his serpentine couch in the milky ocean, with his arms holding conch shell, discus, club, and lotus in his forehands, and in his lotus posture, Vishnu thought in his brilliant mind about the states of the three worlds, like fluttering bee inspecting a lotus. He saw Prahlad immersed in his meditation, and the infernal regions left without a leader. He saw that the world was about to be devoid of the Daitya race. Vishnu, thinking to himself, this lack of demons is likely to uh, cool the military ardor of the gods, as the lack of clouds dries up the waters on earth. Liberation obtained by deprivation of dualism and egoism brings a man to a state of asceticism, just as the lack of moisture dries up and kills a promising plant. If the gods are at rest and contented in themselves, there would be no need of sacrifices and offerings to please and appease them. Eventually, this will lead to the extinction of gods, the end of religious and sacrificial rites among mankind will bring on the destruction of human race, which will cause the dissolution of the earth. With it, the impressions of worldly existences ceases. My creation after the deluge melts away at the improper time like snow by the heat of the sun. What is the good of my benevolent guidance if I were to allow this fruitful earth to go to ruin by my neglect? What would I have to do in this empty void of the world after the extinction of these created beings into nothing? I would have to change my inactive. I would have to change my active nature to a state of cold inactivity and lose myself into the samadhi of final liberation. I see no good in the untimely dissolution of the order of the world. Therefore, I would have the Daityas live to its end. It is owing to the struggles of the demons that the gods are worshipped with sacrifices and other religious rites for their preservation of the earth. Therefore, the demons are necessary for the continuation of these practices. Therefore, I shall have to visit the nether world and restore it to its right order. I shall appoint the lord of the demons to observe his proper duties, like the return of spring fructifies trees. If I raise any other deity as chiefs of the demons and leave Prahlad in his meditation, surely Prahlad will disturb the gods instead of being obedient to them. Because no demon can get rid of his demonic nature like Prahlad. Prahlad is to live to old age in his sacred body until the end of the Kalp age. So it is determined by destiny, the divine and overruling goddess, that Prahlad will continue to live to the end of the Kalp in this very body of his. Therefore, I must go and awaken the Daitya chief from his samadhi, like roaring cloud rousing sleepy peacocks on the top of hills and the banks of rivers. Let that sleeping prince who has rid himself of his ego rule unconcerned over the Daityaris, just as the unconscious pearl reflects the colors of its adjacent objects. In this way, Both gods and demigods will be preserved on the face of the earth, and their contention for superiority over each other will furnish occasion for the display of my prowess. Though I am indifferent to the creation and destruction of the world, yet its continuation in the primordial order is of much concern to others, if not to my insusceptible self. Whatever is alike in its existence and non existence is the same in both its gain and loss. Any effort for having anything is mere foolishness, since addition and subtraction presuppose one another. Therefore, I shall hasten to the infernal region and awaken the Daitya prince to his sense of duty. Then I will resume my calmness and not play about on the stage of the world like the ignorant. I will proceed to the city of the demons amidst their tumultuous violence and rouse the Daitya prince like sunshine raising a drooping lotus. I shall bring the people to order and union like the rainy season collects fleeting clouds on the summit of mountain. With this chapter 38 also comes to an end. And in chapter 39, Vishnu awakens Prahlad and exhorts him to live out his life. Vishnu, Vashiji continued. Now in chapter 39, Vishnu awakens Prahlad and exhorts him to live out his life. Vashishji is continuing, uh, thinking within himself, Vishnu started from his abode in the milking ocean with his companions and moved like the immovable Mandara mountain with all its accompaniments. He entered the city of Prahlad, which resembled Indra's city, by an underground passage lying under the waters of the deep. Then he found the prince of the Asura demons sitting under a golden dome in his hypnotic samadhi, like Brahma sitting in his meditative mood in a cave of Sumeru mountain. The Daityas, their bodies changed by the bright rays of Vishnu's presence, fled far away from him, like a flock of owls from the bright beams of the rising sun. Then Vishnu, accompanied by two or three Daitya chiefs, entered Prahlad's apartment like the bright moon entering the pavilion of the sky at evening, accompanied by two or three stars. There, seated on his eagle, fanned with the fan of Lakshmi, armed with his weapons, and beset by the saints hymning, hymning his praise, Vishnu said, O great soul, rise from your samadhi. Then Vishnu blew his five-note conch shell, its sound reaching heaven's domes. The loud sound of the conch blown by the breath of Vishnu immediately roared with redoubled force like the clouds of the sky or the waves of the great flood. Terrified at the sound, the Daityas fell flat and fainting on the ground like flocks of swine and geese, stunned by the thundering noise of clouds. But the party of the Vaishnavas rejoiced at the sound without the least fear. They flushed with joy like kuruchi flowers blooming at the sound of the clouds. The lord of the Danav demons was slowly roused from his meditative sleep, just as Kadamba flowers open by degrees during intervals of rain. By an act of exhaling, he brought down his vital breath, which was confined in the vertical membrane of the cranium, like the Ganges river gushes out from his high heels and mixes and flows with the whole body of waters into the ocean. In a moment, in a moment, vital breath circulated throughout Prahlad's whole body, like sunbeams spreading over the whole world at sunrise. As vital breath entered into the cells of the nine organs of sense, his mind became susceptible of sensations received through the organs of the body, like reflections in a mirror. The intellect, desiring to know the objects and relying in the reflections of the senses, takes the name of the mind, just as the reflection of a face in the mirror reflects itself again to the visual organs. The mind, having opened or developed itself, his eyelids were about to open of themselves, like the petals of the blue lotus opening by degrees in the morning. Then, breathing, by conveying the sensations to the body through the veins and arteries, gave it the power of motion, just as the current breeze moves to loose lotuses. The same vital breath strengthened the powers of his mind in a short time, like waves of a river become more powerful when it is full of water. At last, his eyes being opened, his body shone forth with life by its mental and vital powers, like a lake blushing with blooming lotuses when the sun rises above the horizon. At this instant, Lord Vishnu bade him to awake instantly at his word, and Prahlad rose like a peacock awakened at the roar of a cloud. Finding Prahlad's eye shining with light and his mind strong with its past memories, the Lord of the Three Worlds spoke to him in the same manner as he had formerly addressed the lotus born Brahma himself. Vishnuji said, O holy youth, remember your large dominions and bring your youthful form and figure to your mind. Then think and ponder why you are transforming yourself into this torpid state without cause. You have no good to desire and no evil to shun. You look on want and plenty in the same light. You must know that what is destined by God is all for your good. You shall have this body until the end of the kalp. So I tell you, rule over this kingdom as a liberated soul, having no ups and downs of the mind. You shall have to live here for a kalp period in the living liberated state of your mind and in full possession of your dominions. You shall have to pass your time with this body of yours and without any anxiety or earthly troubles whatsoever. The body being decayed by this time, you still shall have to abide with your greatness of soul to the end, until the body is broken down like an earthen vessel, and the vital life, like air contained in a pot, comes to mix with the common air of emptiness. Your body, liberated in its lifetime, is to endure in its purity and to the end of the kalp and will witness generations passing before it without any diminution of itself. It is still a long time until the doomsday at the end of the kalp, when the 12 suns will shine together, rocks will melt away, and the world will be burned down to ashes. Why then do you waste away your body even now? Now the winds are not raging with fury, nor is the world grey with age and covered with ashes. The marks on the foreheads of the gods are still fresh. Then why waste your body before its time? The lightning of flood clouds are not flashing or falling like Asura flowers. Then why do vainly waste your precious body so prematurely? The skies don't pour out their showers of rainwater on earth to flood mountain tops, nor do they burst out in fire and burn them down to ashes. Why then do you waste away your body in vain? The world is not yet dissolved into vapor or fused to fumes and smoke. The gods are not extinct, leaving Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva to survive them. Why then do you waste yourself in vain? The earth on all sides is not submerged under water, leaving only the sight of high mountains. So why waste away your body in vain? The sun is not yet shooting his fiery rays in the sky with such fury as to split mountains with hideous cracks, nor do doomsday clouds of world flood, rattle, and crackle in the midday sky. I wander everywhere on my vehicle of Garud and take care of all animal beings lest they die before their time. Therefore, I don't like your negligence of yourself. Here we are, and there are the hills. These are other beings, and that is yourself. This is the earth, and that's the sky. All these are separate entities and must last of themselves. Then why should you neglect your body and not live like the living? A man whose mind is deluded by gross ignorance and one who is the object of afflictions are truly led to hails their death. Death is welcome to he who is too weak and too poor, grossly ignorant, and always troubled by such and similar thoughts in his mind. Death is welcomed by him whose mind is chained in the trap of greedy desires and thrills between its hopes and fears, and who is hurried and carried about in quest of greed and is always restless within himself. He whose heart is parched by the thirst of greed and whose better thoughts are choked by it, like grain sprouts are destroyed by worms, is the person who welcomes death at all times. He who lets the creeping passions of his heart grow as big as palm trees to overshadow the forest of his mind and bear the fruits of continued pain and pleasure is the man who hails his death at all times. He whose mind is irritated by the weeds of chaos growing as strong as the hair on his body, and who is subject to the constant evils of life, is the man who welcomes death for his relief. He whose body is burning under the fire of diseases, and whose limbs are slackened by age and weakness, is the man to whom death is a remedy, and who resorts to its aid for relief. He who is tormented by his ardent desires and ranging raging anger, like the poison of a snake bite, is like a withered tree and invites instant death for his release. The soul quitting the body is called death, and this is unknown to the spiritually minded person who is quite indifferent about the entity and non entity of the body. Life is a blessing to him whose thoughts don't wander beyond the confines of himself, and also to the wise man who knows the investigate and investigates the true nature of things. Life is also a blessing to he who is not given to his egotism, whose understanding is not darkened by untruth, and who preserves his evenness in all conditions of life. His life is a blessing to he who has the inner satisfaction and coolness of his understanding, who is free from passions and hatred, who looks on the world as a mere witness, and who has his concern with nothing. He is blessed in his life who has the knowledge of whatever is desirable or detestable to him and lives aloof from both, with all his thoughts and feelings confined within himself. His life is blessed who views all gross things in the light of nothing and whose heart and mind are absorbed in his silent and unconscious soul. Blessed in Blessed is his life who having his sight represses it from viewing the affair of the world as if they are entirely unworthy of him. His life is blessed who neither rejoices nor grieves at what is desirable or disadvantageous to him, but has his contentment in every state of life, whether favorable or not. He who is pure in his life and keeps company with pure minded men, who spreads the purity of his conduct all about and shuns the society of the impure, is as graceful to behold as the white swan with its snow white wings in the company of the fair fowls of the silvery lake. Blessed is his life, whose sight and memory and the mention of whose name give delight to all persons. Know the life of that man, O Lord of demons, to be truly happy, whose lotus like appearance is as delightful to the bee like eyes of man as the sight of the full moon is delightful to the world. So, with this chapter 39 also comes to an end, and in the chapter 40, Vishnu further explains living liberation to Prahlada. The Lord continued, soundness of the body is what men call life, and quitting the present body for a future one is what they call death. You are released from both these states, O high minded youth, and you have nothing to do with your life or death anymore. I will tell you about the components of life and death. If you know this, you will not have to live or die like other living beings on earth. Though situated in the body, yet you are as unembodied as a disembodied spirit. Though embosomed in emptiness, yet you are as free and fleet as the wind because you are unattached to emptiness. Your ability to perceive the touch of objects proves that you are an embodied being. Your soul is said to be the cause of that perception, as open air is said to be the cause of the growth of trees by putting no hindrance to their height. But neither is the soul the cause of perception, nor is the air the cause of trees' growth. To the monistic immaterialistic, the perception of outward things is no proof of their materiality or the corporeality of the soul that perceives, just as the sight of things in a dream is no proof of their substantiality. All things are comprehended in yourself by the light of your consciousness. Your knowledge of the one in all comprehends everything in it. Then how can you have a body either to take as yourself or to reject it from you? Whether the season of spring appears or not, or a hurricane happens to blow or subside, it is nothing to the pure soul, which is clear of all connection whatever. Whether the hills fall headlong to the ground, or the flames of destruction devour all things, or rapid gales rend the skies, it is no matter to the soul which rests secure in itself. Whether creation exists or not, or whether all things perish or grow, it is nothing to the soul which exists of itself. The load of this body doesn't waste by the waste of its frame, nor is he strengthened by the strength of the body. He doesn't move by any more bodily movement, or sleep when the body and its senses are absorbed in sleep. From where do you get this false thought in your mind that you belong to the body, that you are an embodied being, and that you come to take, retain, and quit this mortal frame at different times? Forsake the thought that you will do so. And so, after doing this and that, they who know the truth have given up such desires and vain expectations. All waking and living persons have something to do in this world, and thereby they have to reap the results of their actions. But he who does nothing doesn't take the name of an active agent and has nothing to expect. He who is not the agent of an action has nothing to do with its consequence. For he who doesn't sow the grains doesn't reap the harvest. Ending of action and its fruition brings on acquiescence, which, when it has become habitual and firm, receives the name of liberation. All intellectual beings and enlightened men and those who lead pure and holy lives have all things under their comprehension. Therefore, there is nothing left for them to learn anew or reject what they have learned. It is for limited understanding and limited powers of the body and mind to grasp or leave out something. But to man of unbounded capacity, there is nothing to be received or left out. When a man is set at ease after he ceases having any relationship to being a possessor or possessing any external object, and when this sense of his not having any relationship becomes a permanent feeling in him, then he is said to be liberated in his lifetime. Great men like you, being placed in this state of perpetual concern, perpetual unconcern and rest, discharge their duties with as much ease as if sleeping. When one's desires are drowned in his reliance on God, he views the existing world shining in his spiritual light. He takes no delight in the pleasing objects about him, nor does he regret others' afflictions. All his pleasures are within his own soul. With his wakeful mind, he meets all his affairs with his spiritual unconcern, like a mirror receiving the reflections of objects without being tainted by them. In his waking, he rests in himself, and in his sleep, he reclines amidst the drowsy world. In his actions, he turns about like frolicking children, and his desires lie dormant in his soul. O you great soul, continue to enjoy your supreme bliss for the period of a kalp by placing your mind's reliance upon victorious Vishnu. Enjoy the prosperity of your dominions by exercising your virtues and good qualities. So with this, chapter 40 also comes to an end, and we rest our today's reading session here itself. This is completed with the grace of Lord Ram. Shivom, friends, with the grace of Lord Ram, we will again meet. Shivom.